All right. Welcome back, everyone. So now that we have set up our research space, we've done our pre-analysis plan, we're actually going to start documenting our research process, right? This is the part where we're actually starting to do our research. How do we document the workflow that we're going through? So as Brian mentioned before, right, there are a lot of problems that can pop up when we're thinking about documenting that research workflow. The first is files change over time, and I'm really bad at keeping track of how those files change over time. I may or may not have a folder on my computer that has some files in it that are named Final Analysis 1, Final Analysis 2, Really Final Analysis, Really Final Analysis 2. And then I later found out that my advisor had a file called Final Analysis 4. I don't know what happened to Final Analysis 3, and Final Analysis 2 had actually been updated after Final Analysis 4. So right, keeping track of versions is really hard, especially when collaborators get into the mix. Additionally, I might use different tools than my collaborators. So maybe I use GitHub for versioning some of my code, but Brian and Sarah don't want to touch GitHub with a 10-foot pole. How do I effectively let them see the analysis scripts I'm working with without forcing them to use a tool that maybe isn't part of their workflow right now? As we mentioned before, I forget things, and back documenting is really hard. So what are the solutions to this? First is to find a little bit better of a version control system that doesn't require me to remember to update the name of my file every single time. The second is to try and document as we go. And one of the things we'll be talking about, especially with the OSF, is trying to automate the parts of this process that we can. So trying to build some of this into the tools we're using so that we don't have to consciously think about this all the time. The work isn't only being done by us, it's being done by some of the tools we're using as well. So going back to my live project, here's the project I have. It's pretty sparse right now. It just has my wiki content. So I want to do a couple of things. The first is I want to start adding the files that I already have to the OSF. So as I mentioned before, I can click on this OSF storage icon if I want to upload something into the materials section of my project. So I can click on this upload button. I will get a normal search of my computer. And I can go ahead and upload the questionnaire file. And I'm also going to upload the raw data file. So I choose those, and they're going to be uploaded. But then I realize, wait, raw data does not actually belong in my materials section, so I'm just going to click on it, drag and drop it, and move it into the section where it actually belongs. So these files are now stored on OSF storage. I or anyone else who has access to this particular part of the project can click on the file, and for most common file types, they will actually see the file in the project itself. So now Brian and I both know, hey, this is the questionnaire file, this is the most recent version, this is what we should be working off of. But I mentioned how files are going to change over time, and so we want a way of tracking that. So maybe I have been working with this questionnaire file, and I decide that I, want to make some changes. I could resave this as questionnaire v1, but I was talking about how that system can get problematic really, really quickly. So I'm actually going to use the built-in version control of the OSF to help me out a little bit here. So I'm going to save over this file on my personal laptop with the same name. So right now, this is the only version I have on my laptop. If I go back to the OSF project and click in the exact same part of my project, I'm going to then upload that file again. Choose that. And the system is going to realize, hey, these two files have the same name, it's uploading to the same section. This is probably a new version of that file. So when I click on it, it's going to show me the most recent version, right? Make some changes. But if I click on this revisions tab, I'm going to see that there was a previous version. It's going to have the date and time that that was made. Who made the changes? Me. So if Brian was uploading new versions, it would show that Brian had made that change. And I'm always able to go back and download or look at those old versions. So all those versions are stored in the system. They're always there. I can go back and look at them. But visually, I'm just looking at the most recent version of the file. So my collaborators also know what they should be working with right there. So that's a way to use version control for files that, like Word files or data files or something like that. For anything that can be edited in a text editor, I have another option. So I'm actually going to upload an R script. And once that uploads, I can click on it, and you'll notice that I have an edit button on this. So anything that you can open in a text editor can be edited natively on the OSF. So I click on Edit, it pulls up an editing window, and I can maybe add some documentation, required libraries. I am then going to save that, and once it saves, once again, the most recent version is the one that comes up, and the revisions tab has been updated. So just like my Word document, these versions are all being tracked and saved and stored. Brian knows what the most recent version of the analysis script is, and he can work with that. So what happens if I have multiple contributors and, Brian and I are maybe working on the questionnaire file at the same time? You'll notice that there's this little red indicator next to my questionnaire file. What that means is that Brian has checked that file out. He has said, hey, I'm working on this file right now. I'm going to be making some changes to it. You can look at the file, you can download it, but don't try and make some changes because those versions are going to get out of sync. Brian disagrees with me. He doesn't think we should make changes. And right, I can see that he uploaded the new version. Also, I can force that check-in. So maybe Brian has had this questionnaire file for 3 months, and I keep emailing him and be like, Brian, where is my thing? You said you would get this to me. He's like, oh, Courtney, I'm coming. He never gets it to me. I can take back control of that file and say, nope, you've had your time. I now need to take this back and make changes to it. So that's a way I can use the version control built in on the system itself. But there may be other ways and other tools that I use for my work. So one of the things that Brian kept mentioning is that when we are using the OSF, we really want to connect up the pieces and parts of somebody's workflow. If they don't have tools for those pieces yet, we provide some basic functionality with the OSF. But we know that there are great tools out there that some people might use. So some of you may use GitHub for version control of analysis scripts and code. GitHub is a fantastic tool for versioning plain text files, and it would be silly for us to say for you to stop using that. But some of you may not be at that point yet. Or you might love using Google Drive to create collaborative documents. So we want to make sure that those are kept in the same location with my questionnaire file so I know the data that went with it, the code that went with it, the manuscript I'm building off of it. So the way I can do that is to take advantage of the add-ons that the OSF has. So if I go into Settings, and I scroll down, I'm going to get a list of the current add-ons we offer. Some of them are storage add-ons, Amazon S3, Box, Dropbox. Others of them are things like Figshare or Dataverse, which are repositories for data, GitHub, Google Drive, and Mendeley and Zotero. So let's say that the analysis scripts for this project actually live in a GitHub repo that I have. If I click on this, it's going to give me some information about how this actually works. I click Confirm, and it is then going to ask me to import an access token. If this is the first time I do this, I'm going to be asked for a password. I've done this before, though. So what I'm going to do is get a list of all of the repos that I have in GitHub, which is kind of like what are all the folders I have in GitHub, if you're not familiar with it. I can pick whichever one of these I want, and I can click Save. And then when I go back to my project, what I'll see is the contents of that GitHub repository are now showing up in my project. So what's happened is I've created a two-way door. These files are still stored on GitHub, but I can either interact with them through GitHub or through the OSF. Brian can see them through the OSF if he never wants to touch GitHub. So I'm also going to show Dropbox for those of you who are not familiar with GitHub. And so you can see that you could upload and you can add on multiple different types of add-ons to a particular project to really knit that workflow together. So Brian is actually showing it. So once Brian does that, he'll let me know, and I'll refresh the screen so I can see what he's done. So this is all the contents of Dropbox, Brian's Minilabs 2 codebook Dropbox file. So I can view these through here. If I really wanted to, I could actually start uploading new versions of these files. So Brian wants to be careful what kind of permission settings he gave to the component. on the OSF that he added this Dropbox section to. But the point is that I can house this Dropbox folder with the other contents of this project, and I can also, if I want to, add other tools. So I can go into the materials, I can click on settings, and to that I could maybe add a Google Drive if I wanted to be collaboratively creating materials. So these add-ons are a way to knit together all the different parts of your workflow. What this allows you to do is see them all in one place. If you choose to share, you can share them all from one place, and it means that you don't have to keep track of the permission settings of 5 different add-ons for like 5 different people for a big project. I don't have to add Brian to my Dropbox and my GitHub and my Box and my Google Drive and my S3. I can add all those to the OSF, add him once, and keep track of those permission settings. But he can still view, and if I give him permission to, interact with those files. So I mentioned the add-ons we currently have. Here they are. We have a lot more under development that will hopefully be starting to connect in those other parts of the workflow for tools that people commonly use. Brian showed you a slide of like ones we would love to have. These are the ones that are currently under development. So you'll see some more domain-specific repositories like NeuroVault for neurodata. You'll see things like JASP for doing data analysis, Open Sesame and Galaxy for collecting data, and also things like DMP tool for creating data management plans. So really trying to document the process of the research, connect up those tools so that no matter what you use, whether you take advantage of the built-in features of the OSF or have tools that you already love for those features, that it's all centrally located. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of activities. So for the PIs, I would like you to upload the raw data and the analysis scripts to their appropriate components. RAs, upload the questionnaire file. PIs, once they've done that, go ahead and upload a new version of that file using the built-in version control. And for each person, if you feel comfortable, if you have, add-on where you have like a test folder or something in it that you want to connect that up. So we'll give you all a few minutes to do that. And as normal, Brian and I will be moseying and mingling. You can raise your hand if you have any questions or run into any problems during the activity, and then we'll have the Q&A section after that. All right? So now that everybody has finished the activities, we're going to take a couple minutes for 1 or 2 short questions about anything that you had questions about during this section or during this activity.
Just a quick question. After you add the add-on into your files list, can you delete it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can always remove an add-on after you've added it. So the way to delete an add-on is kind of the same process, just backwards. So if I go into settings, if it was the add-on that I had added, I can actually disconnect his Dropbox. So there's this little checkbox right here. I can just uncheck that, and it's going to say, hey, do you want to remove this add-on? I will click remove. The contents are all still in his Dropbox, right? I haven't deleted any of his files. It's just that I've unconnected that file from the OSF project. Thank you so much. So we're going to close out this section, and the next section we're going to start talking about is sharing.